This is the UB Football Podcast with Brad Ryder and Scott Wilson.
What's up, UB Football Podcast? Brad Ryder and Scott Wilson. We've got a little space, a little breathing room here, thanks to a weekend game followed by midweek MACtion, but I didn't even count it. Was it 8 days off, 10 days off? We're in that range. So we've got some breathing room and coming off of a win, looking forward to get things back on track and continue. The MAC is tight. It's going to be tight. There are 3 games left on the schedule. Hello, Scott Wilson. How are you?
Hello.
And how are you feeling after, I guess that was a good win. That was a good win. The fourth quarter, forget it. That was a good win. I think, right? That's where we are?
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, any win's a good win. It's if you watch any of the midweek games here this week, as you mentioned, it's a quasi bye here for the Bulls. They put the MAC leaderboard up on the screen, and if you look quick, it looks like every team has the same team,
right?
Because they pretty much are. I would liken it to outside of Kent State, there's like 11 guys on the battlefield, and all of them have a really sharp sword, but then also all of them are also mortally wounded. So it's like, yeah, every one of these teams, they can get you. They have a weapon, and they have a way that they can beat you. And then they also have a real soft spot that if a team comes and executes, they're toast too.
Right.
So that's what's making this stretch run really, really interesting, exciting. The first season that we've had the no divisions, and it's making all these games even more important. And it's making some of these teams that are in that soft, cushy middle not give up. Because they're still in it. Because everybody is still in it. They're not having to battle. At this point, we'd probably be talking like, Toledo, Western, how's that going to play out? Those are really the only 2 teams in the West battling. And instead, there's 12 teams, or probably legitimately about 8 teams left that, still have a realistic look at, if the things fall the right way and we keep winning, we're going to be in Detroit. And luckily, the Bulls are one of those teams, and one of the teams right now in one of the better positions there at that upper middle class, if you will.
Can you do a rough number? I don't want to get into details of this team needs to win this game this week, blah, 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 but give me your, just off the top of your head, percentage guess of if the Bulls win their next 3 games, what percentage of you says they go to Detroit? It's better than 50, right?
Yeah, I would probably say between 30 and 50.
Okay.
I'd be right around there, just because the loss in Ohio looms, because they would have the tiebreaker on you, and you would need them to pick up another loss. And I don't have their schedule necessarily here in front of me, but I think that they had one of the easier schedules coming down the stretch. And then, you need Western. You need one of those 2, really. You need one of those 2 to fall off. And then, again, Miami, still laying there in the weeds. We would normally have seen them by now. But with the new scheduling and the pod system, we aren't seeing them this year. And they're just kind of sitting around there, laying in the cut, and dangerous as ever. And they're kind of that third team that the Bulls would need to really have go away. So they need 2 of those 3 to drop off, and unfortunately the Bulls have lost to 2 of them.
Right.
And Western right now is the easier of the losses because they only have the 1 loss. But if Ohio, you need Ohio here to lose and get, I would imagine, to 3 losses so that you can have the 2 losses and pass them.
Yeah.
And then still have to worry about what Miami's doing. So
yeah, it sure looks like we're digging through crazy tiebreaker scenarios. Like there's a good chance that a week or 2 from now we've got charts all over the place of what happens in the case of a 3-team tiebreak and a 4-team tiebreak and all that kind of stuff. So that all could be there.
Right.
But
Well,
like you said, the division stuff's gone. I know I've got Ohio here. They've got Eastern at home. They're at Toledo. They're home against Ball State. It's not even about the specifics of it. It's just about how are you feeling? And you're 30 to 50%. I was thinking it was higher than that. I was thinking if you win your games, things should sort themselves out. But it's not going to be that simple. We're just going to be looking at tiebreakers, I think.
Yeah, and Western's got BG at Central and home against Eastern coming up after just losing to Western. So, losing to Northern last night, actually. Northern, for the first time in a while, looked like the team that was kind of expected to be there at the start of the season, but has been reeling since the Bulls went in there to DeKalb and took care of business.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's losable games in there. BG, very good. They're near the top as well, but they had a harder schedule to start the season, and I think BG is kind of a sneaky team in there as well, as they've kind of clipped along here and picked up some wins. So, I mean, BG and Miami are the sneaky teams, but really, if you're going to be serious about it, you're going to have Western and Ohio pick up some L's here coming down the stretch.
Full disclosure, my wife is trying to figure out when we're going to get our Christmas tree, and she's got December 7th in her head. And I said, don't book December 7th. Just hold off on December 7th. That happens to be the day of the MAC championship game, and I would like to not schedule anything for December 7th until further notice. I told her going into the game last week against Akron that if the Bulls didn't win, she could feel free to schedule December 7th.
Yeah, that day's open.
But to hold off. And I'm sticking with that. There's still a pretty reasonable chance that if things go well, the Bulls are going to Detroit. All right, so the Akron game. My main takeaway is that it's the first time this year that I've seen the best part of the offense and the best part of the defense at the same time for a good stretch of a game. And if that's what they can be, I feel great. But as we've seen, the offense isn't that all the time. The defense isn't that all the time. But the offense, I still feel, is building up. And there's something about them that I like a little bit better each week. And it seems like the cohesion is starting to come along. And of course, we're going to point to the quarterback, CJ Agbana, and his development and his comfort level and all of that. But seeing the defense come up with some big stops and big takeaways, 4 consecutive drives in which the Zips did not end with a kick. It was 3 takeaways and then a turnover on downs. And that's where the game was won for the Bulls. They nearly gave it away late, but they held on, and it was fine. But that my takeaway was I like where the offense is going, and it was nice to see the defense again for 3 quarters.
Right. Yeah. Most importantly for me, the defense. I mean, they'd been getting taken care of here. They've been getting pushed around a little bit the last couple of weeks. It was important for them to come out, and the Akron had their first drive, and no problem. Very little resistance where you're thinking, uh-oh. But, hey, they regrouped, came back, forced the turnovers, flipped the field position, and like you said, the offense has been coming around here. Since that Western game, they were obviously really good. They've been pretty good here the last couple of weeks. They were moving the ball against Ohio, just could not get the ball into the end zone. I really like you said, the development of Agbana, and more importantly, we've continued to see him feel comfortable and pass the ball really, really well down the field. 2 wide receivers, 2 different targets, and then them making great catches in that game as well. But for the first time, I felt like we saw the full package from Agbana, which is, this isn't there, I'm pulling it down, I'm making a play. And then also just him in the running game, being patient, letting the block set up, and then getting that second gear and moving it down the field and picking up some big first downs. It was the whole thing for me. It was the first time that we saw all of those pieces put together for Agbana. And if that's what he's going to do coming down the stretch, the offense is going to be humming. I think if there's one real thing that you can point to as being a weak spot for this team right now, would be the Bulls running the ball in running situations. And that's what we saw, I think, more than anything else in the fourth quarter. Can we run the ball when the other team has a pretty good feeling like we're going to run the ball? And if you remember back to the Leipold years, the answer to that was
hell yes.
9 times out of 10, yeah. Yeah, no, that's getting done. And first year of Lembo here, it's been a roller coaster. Has not been consistent. We got into the fourth quarter when the Bulls were trying to take the clock down. They couldn't run the ball when Akron knew that they were going to run the ball. And all of a sudden, it's 2 quick 3-and-outs, and things are getting uncomfortable. And then you have to start playing real football again after you've already taken your foot off the gas, and it changes. Now, on those drives, if they had moved the sticks one time, it changes the entire complexion the rest of the game.
Well, you get to take 2 more minutes off the clock. With one first down, you're roughly you're going to take another 2.5 minutes off the clock.
Right.
And, when you've got whatever it was, 41-7, what was the lead? 38-7 lead. When you got 38-7 lead, I mean, I get why you're running the ball. And Akron gets why you're running the ball. And that's why everybody in the building knows why you're running the ball. And you still need to have success there. But, it was still the right thing to do, even without success, because the clock was the main thing you're dealing with, and you've got that kind of a lead. So they did it right, and ultimately it worked out, because really, if you think about it, we're going to run the ball, we're going to run as much clock as we can, and if we keep running the clock, they can't possibly win this game. And it proved to be correct, thanks to a muffed punt and a recovery by John Keogh at one point that really helped. But that was the game they were playing. They were playing, let's bleed this clock. And like you said, a little bit of effectiveness and actually gaining yardage while bleeding the clock would have allowed them to bleed it much more quickly and effectively. So, yeah, really what we're talking about here is I needed 1 or 2 more first downs. And then this game, it's a 20-point game instead of an 11-point game final.
Right. And I think the defense as well falls into the category of we know they have to pass. We're up 38-7. We're playing softer shell coverages. We're dropping back, making them throw underneath, and they ended up putting the other team into a bit of a heater. Akron started getting confidence, and while, at the time it felt like false confidence because it's we're kind of letting you do this. Nonetheless,
like when you laughed at the guy for dancing after his touchdown.
Well, I mean, listen, that was ridiculous.
It was,
but. It got things going, and they kind of took their foot off the gas, and luckily Akron and gave up the ball there on that last punt because Bulls defense was getting hurt up the hash and in the seams there, and some of the extra scrambles, just not really running down the field but buying time, were hurting the Bulls, exposing some areas between the corners and the safeties in the fourth quarter there. And, it all worked out. Like you said, it was as dominant a close win you can have, right? Because they really did punish that Akron team. They were, after that first drive, Akron's quarterback, no matter who they had back there, was getting hit almost every play. The Bulls were getting pressure from 4. They were causing a lot of problems in the passing game. They were not allowing any type of consistent run game to get going again. And that included, when they brought in a running quarterback on those 4th down plays where they use him as a battering ram and he 9 times out of 10 gets it. Well, guess what? No. Bulls stopped that up and really did a nice job. But things got a little wacky there at the end, which you would anticipate. And, it's basically what we said going into the game. Akron's a lot better. They are. They didn't play like it for 3 quarters, but I think the final score indicates right about where they're at, which is probably about 7 to 11 points off of the middle of the pack of the conference. So they played tight games. They're just not there yet to be able to pull out those wins, and the Bulls did the work that they needed to do in the first 3 quarters. That still counts too.
Yeah.
To have a big enough lead that you can mess around for a quarter and still win by double digits. It felt uncomfortable, but it all still counts in the end as a nice win.
Was it the defense was able to do in the first three quarters, the simple explanation is pass rush and takeaways. Is there a more complicated or more interesting way to explain what they were able to do defensively to give them that sort of success?
No, I mean, that's about it. I mean, Akron's a team that if they could get that run game going, they become really hard to defend because they're a pretty good passing team. I mean, Finley could rip the ball. We saw a number of pretty good passes.
Yeah, he was impressive.
Certainly, I mean, by leaps and bounds, really the best quarterback play we've seen from an Akron quarterback in the last maybe decade. I mean, that was a pretty impressive performance, even in the first half when he was getting beat up. He was still making some pretty good throws, like once a drive. So, for the Bulls to be able to get back there and really disrupt him, really cause him problems, force some off-timing throws, get the ball out a little bit earlier than he wanted to in some parts, and then take away some of that easy run game that you can get when they get that passing game going. It was, I mean, the turnovers flipped the field. It took away the fact that, all of a sudden it was 17-7 and kept rolling from there, and it took away the option. Once it gets up into 24-7, 31-7, Akron's not going to be running the ball anymore.
Yep. It's
just they're not really all that good at it to begin with, and they're not in a position to do it anymore. So then you don't have to worry about it. And, they put themselves in a good position. And I'll just add this in. If you have the ball and Red Murdoch is in your area and you don't have two hands on it, you're asking for it. Like, the ball's probably coming out because he's got a ton of forced fumbles this year. It's been really impressive, and he's just a monster. He's a hard hitter that gets the ball out almost every time, once a game here. So he, to me, early on in that game, really flipped the momentum, getting the ball out, forcing the fumble, and the Bulls are back in business.
All right, so up next is Ball State. It's a home game against Ball State. Of course, the old wooden mustache is on the line. We're not going to dwell too much on the rivalry trophy, the storied history of the old wooden mustache. But what are we looking at here? I don't know this team well. You're the film study guy. What's the situation here heading into our first midweek MACtion of the season?
Well, you haven't seen a bunch of these guys because this is the first trip to UB since 2016, if I'm correct. So Ball State's not really all.
Yeah, we've probably been there once or twice since then. Once.
Yeah, we went there in 21, end of the season.
We went there in 17, I think, when I had my broken leg.
Lost 20-3 back in 21 at the end of that long season there.
Yeah, and I think 17 or maybe 16.
But yeah, they haven't been in UB in a while, and of course we saw them in the 2020 MAC championship game, but that was in Detroit, and a game we don't really want to talk about.
We can talk about the 08 championship game. That was them too.
That's right. That was a fun one. But yeah, I mean, this team, they kind of fell into a bit of the, how we always joke about the bowl scheduling, where, like, if we were to schedule the worst team in America right now for 4 years from now, they will be a top 10 team.
Right.
Like, that's it. Ball State ran into a little bit of that here this year in their non-conference schedule. This is the best team that the Miami Hurricanes have had in, like, a decade. Since,
like, Ja'Cory Harris? Yeah.
Yeah. They're at Miami here this year, and they got stomped out there. Then they say, all right, well, James Madison's coming up from the FCS. Let's get us a couple games with them. That'll be
problem.
Nice. Another group of 5 teams.
They're coming
they're coming off of an 11-win season, like back-to-back 11-win seasons, and they still have a lot of talent down there. Still a really good team, and they had to play at James Madison, and that went poorly. And then you say, all right, well, our second Power 5 game, we're going to be easy breezy. Can't go wrong because we're playing at Vanderbilt. And, this is like Vanderbilt's best team ever. basically, coming off of like a couple weeks. They had to face them a couple weeks removed from them beating Alabama. And, they hung around. They played pretty well in that game. They lost by 10, but hung around. But some of those non-conference games, again, we're seeing a typical thing for MAC teams. It kind of skews some of the numbers and stuff. This Ball State team in conference play, really good. Really good. And they do nothing but play close games. 7 of the last 8 games, 1 score. Every MAC game this year, 1 score game. They have had leads in the fourth quarter of every MAC game they've lost this year.
Wow.
They are a very good team that just have that hole. The defense has not been consistent enough. They've been getting better as the season's gone on, for sure, but just hasn't been consistent enough to hold on to those leads at the end of games, and it's cost them. It's cost them big, and that's why they're in the position they are, but they're also a very dangerous team. Ball State can beat anybody in the MAC, period. I think they're that good, but they also have a defense that has allowed other teams to be able to beat them pretty routinely. So that's kind of the weakness. For me, Ball State's offense is worrisome in the fact that Mike New, their head coach, old quarterbacks coach in New Orleans for the Saints with Drew Brees and Sean Payton. So he's got a little bit of that, I don't want to say West Coast flair, but a little bit more NFL type stuff that they do. And it reminds me a little bit of what Western did. A little bit more motion than what Western had, but you couple that with the fact that if you remember the first half against Western, they had a tight end that had 3 touchdowns at halftime.
I do.
Now, the Bulls shut him out after that. The Bulls took care of that, but for a half, it was a problem. Ball State's walking in here with Tanner Koziel, who is just a monster, like 6'6" tight end, who is the number 1 receiving threat for Ball State. And that offense, it's like they take the snap, it's a pass, we're looking to Koziel, and then we're looking to see if anybody else is open, and then we're going right back to Koziel. Like, he is the man. And even though teams have focused on him and tried to take him away, they've done a good job hiding him, moving him, putting him in good spots, and they are going to get him the ball. And that was a weak spot for the Bulls in that game against a similar type of system. So something to keep an eye on for sure, and I think the Bulls have to figure out a way to take Koziel away as much as they can. He's going to get his touches. He's going to get his targets. But he's really good at sitting down in zones. He's got just enough speed to really kind of bother you in the seams. And when you get to the red zone, he's going on the corner route, and the ball is going to be lobbed up. If they have 1st and 10 at the 10, one of those 3 plays is going to be a throw to Koziel, period. They're going to try and get him on a linebacker going to the corner. That's it. And it works a lot because he's really good. He can make the one-handed catches. He's a little bit more of a receiving tight end, but he'd be getting a ton of attention right now if BG didn't have a tight end in Harold Fannin that is top 10 in the country in receiving yards. Koziel would be getting love as the best tight end in the conference, but he's not because he's in the same conference with Fannin. So, but he's the number 1. So they have a nice mix of power backs that can run, but for me, it's been the passing game, and their passing game has gotten a little bit better the last couple of weeks. They had a wide receiver, Bowick, and he was out for a good portion of the first half of the year with an ab injury, has come back, and since given them a nice little weapon on the outside to keep your eyes out there so that they can work a little bit more in the middle of the field with Koziel. So he's been a nice late addition to their team, almost like a trade acquisition for a team that can bring in somebody. And he's come in here in the middle of the year and has really made a difference in some of their downfield passing, and just to give them a legitimate guy on the outside that you really have to worry about in addition to some of the other players. And the quarterback is similar to Hayden Wolf from Western. He can move a little bit. But he doesn't want to run. He wants to throw the ball. And he plays it safe. He's pretty accurate. He doesn't have any type of crazy arm. But he doesn't really make bad decisions. And he's willing to check the ball down. And he's willing to go on drives. So, it's going to be a tall task for this Buffalo defense to see if they can heal some of the things that they had problems with against Western, against a Ball State team that does some similar things.
All right, so let's move to the other side of the ball and what you've seen from Ball State's defense, what you think can be exploited, how you think the Bulls want to attack against Cardinals.
Well, one thing has been kind of consistent, and that's Ball State's defense has given up some swing passes, screen plays, and they have had trouble with some post routes. Like, they've given up a post route touchdown in almost every game that I saw. And that's starting right from the beginning of the season, Missouri State and Miami, all the way through. Part of that is that they're not a team that we have talked about a lot as far as portal graduation losses, just because some other teams in the conference have really gotten picked over, like Ohio and Miami. Some of these other teams have really gotten picked on. But this is the second year in a row now Ball State was entering the year with 4 new starters in their secondary. And no matter how good your recruiting is or, the portal guys, it's just tough. Like, there's no continuity. So they've had to kind of grow into their defense, and they've had to acclimate new guys and get everybody consistent. And on those post routes, it's some of the communication between the safeties. And their secondary isn't exactly a good unit as far as tackling is concerned, consistently at least. Again, they've gotten better in conference play, but still not as consistent as they need to be, especially when the rubber meets the road come the fourth quarter. Defensive line's okay. They mostly get pressure if they blitz. If they bring a fifth guy, they're able to kind of start to get some heat. They're okay against the run, but for me, just watching them play, it's their secondary has been a problem for them. Now, obviously, it looks like a way bigger problem against Miami than it does against Northern, but it still has been kind of consistently an issue a couple of times a game in big moments that they haven't been able to come up and make the play when they needed to. And I think the Bulls are going to want to certainly run the football. I will note that Ball State did play against that inverted bone that the Bulls have used, most notably against Western and Toledo, especially Toledo. Vanderbilt ran some of that stuff in their game against them. So that wrinkle won't necessarily be a wrinkle against them. They have seen it. They played it pretty well, actually, against Vanderbilt. Didn't give up too much there. So I'm not sure how much of that we'll see. We didn't really see too much of it last week from the Bulls. But we know it's still in there somewhere. I would assume you're going to see once or twice, but I don't know if it's going to be played as much as it was against Toledo, certainly. But I like the direction that this passing offense for the Bulls has gone in. And with that being said, I think that there's some areas out there that the Bulls can find and can pick on. And if they're going to keep the progression going like we've seen the last couple of games in that passing game, I think, this is a good team, and it's certainly a ripe situation to come through on. But it's not going to be, I would wager, this ain't going to be 38-7, and then the Bulls have to figure out what to do in the fourth quarter. Just Ball State doesn't do that.
Yeah.
That's not what's going to happen. This is going to be, come the start of the fourth quarter, it's going to be a tight game, and someone's going to have to win it in the fourth.
The Bulls have at least hinted at having a lot more looks, schemes, whatever you want to call it, ideas to show out of that inverted bone. Might this be the opportunity for that, specifically if they have faced some of it and had some success against some of it in that Vandy game?
I mean, you could. I think they're going to run some of it. I would assume that the Bulls are going to do it. Every game they've run it a couple of times. Just nothing is consistent. Like, they came out in Toledo and were like, by the way, we had a week off. We're a triple option team this week.
Just came up with something here.
And
see what you think.
You guys are going to be eating this for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I don't think it's going to be like that. But, if they've got some variations off of it that they think that they can expose, or if they've got a nice matchup, then I would assume that they're going to push that button. Because that's really what we've seen is the Bulls. There's been a lot. I might be wrong. It just feels like there's been a little bit more motion in the offense last couple of weeks. It just feels like, this is a new offense, new offensive coordinator. Everybody's still got to settle in and get used to it. And I think CJ has been. I think the wide receivers have been. I think the running game is still there at times. And I like the fact that Aljay's kind of grabbed a hold of it and become the main guy. And there's certainly some things there that they need to work on, but I don't know, it feels more consistent having the one guy back there in Aljay, and he's done a nice job with it. So I would assume that we're going to see some of those wrinkles, just not in the bulk, because like I said, they faced it 4 or 5 times against Vanderbilt and handled it really well. Like, everybody was assigned up. There was very little movement for Vanderbilt to move the ball that way. It's a well-coached defense. It's a defense, it's same system they've had there for, I think, 4 or 5 seasons. So everybody kind of knows what they're doing in the front half. It's the back half that's kind of racing to catch up, and they're slowly coming along, but it has really hurt them in the back end more than anything.
All right. Anything else you need to throw in before we put a wrap on this thing?
Midweek game. Never underestimate what happens on Tuesdays in this conference. Honestly, I mean, anything could happen. Absolutely anything. I mean, Ball State, they played Tuesday, and like the first drive of the game, the Miami guy just dropped the ball on the punt.
I was just about to say
he was going to step it, and he just dropped the football.
I know, and then he picked it up, and then he threw a pass kind of sideways that was intercepted for a touchdown. What's funny is Tuesday nights I play trivia with John Fuller and Bob Gaughan and our friend Dan Cave, and we were out at Anchor Bar actually, and the way that I was sitting, I didn't see the TV with the MACtion on it, but Fuller was like, "Oh, there's our first MACtion of the year." Like, what just happened? We couldn't, was that a fake? Like, we just soared aside and then watched it as, the punter got the ball. He just dropped it, but then was able to pick it up and then decided to throw a pass, and it was ill-advised right into the hands of a defender for a touchdown. But, yes, this is what people love and mock about midweek MACtion. It was all on display right in the first quarter, and, I'm hoping to see some of that stuff. That's what we signed up for. We go to these games knowing that there's a good chance of mayhem, and I like mayhem sometimes. I also want the win, but I am fully on board with midweek MACtion being a little bit crazier than Saturday MACtion, and I'm in.
Me too.
All right, man. I'll see you there. We got a little bit of a break here, but that means we can enjoy an entire weekend of football and then take a breath, and then I'll see you Tuesday at the game.
Awesome. See you then.
I don't know about you guys, but I just want to get the hell out of here.